LRPs. Some of the best yet. Some of the best yet. They bite like that, like that, like that. Big bass, double digits. Always catch more, man. Seen it all. Caught them all. Still more.
Good morning, everybody. This is Oliver Nye here, your host on this episode of Big Bass Streams. Today's theme, big baits, thick lines, heavy weights. Today I'm going to be going over my 2020 big bait and swim bait setup. Been getting a lot of questions from you guys about what rods, what reels, for what baits and what applications. I'm going to do my best to break this down and give you as much insight as possible in an efficient manner. Let's start from the smaller scale up. It's important to keep in mind that my experiences with traditional fishing, whether it's jerkbait fishing, crankbait fishing, topwater fishing, worm fishing, you name it, has greatly influenced my approach to fishing big bass with big baits, and many of the same mechanics I've learned over the years definitely apply, especially on the big bait scale. Keep in mind that what I'm sharing with you guys today is based off of my own experiences and preferences, but also keep in mind that I take a lot of pride in being as efficient and effective as possible. Some may disagree with me, but you're more than welcome to prove me otherwise. Till then, I stand pretty confidently in front of my body of work. We've documented a lot of successes, but we've also documented a lot of failures through a lot of the content that we've been shooting over all of these years. But each one of those failures represents a learning opportunity. Okay, so those are the factors that dictate my decision making when it comes to choosing my tackle. And that includes the rods, the reels, the gear ratio, the tapers, the line type, the baits. It's a never-ending puzzle, and once again, that is always what fascinates me about bass fishing in general, but especially trophy bass fishing. You got to piece all these puzzle pieces, and the smallest detail can cost you the fish of a lifetime. So anyways, we're going to start from the bottom up. We're going to work our way up different size ranges of baits. Now this video is going to pertain to 7.5, 8-inch baits and bigger. Baits like a 6-inch Magdraft are awesome swim baits, but to me that falls below the threshold of what I consider a big bait. So generally 7.5, 8 inches is my minimum threshold for what I consider a big swim bait or a big bait in general. So that's what this video here is focused on today. All right, so one of the questions that I get a lot from a lot of viewers, if you could pick 1, 2, or 3 baits to start off with, what would they be? Well, number one, I'd pick a smaller bait. The smaller the bait, generally the more engagement you're going to get. You're still going to target some really, really nice fish, but the numbers of those 3 to 8 pound fish, depending on where you live, is going to be drastically higher than when you're fishing a 9-inch bait, a 10-inch bait, an 11-inch bait, 12-inch bait in some cases. So you want to make sure you're getting a lot of engagement, getting bites, catching fish, making mistakes when the stakes are lower and those fish are smaller, and then you work your way up. There's levels to this, especially, just like anything else. On the lower end of this big bait spectrum, we've got the I-Slide 185. This is a 7.5-inch hard body glide bait. It's got that magnetic system, which is really nice for keeping those hooks pinned up against the body of the bait when it's swimming. Makes for a little bit more subtle and quieter presentation. This is a bait that we do really well on with spotted bass, smallies especially, and largemouth. Now, because of my smallmouth fishing experiences, I've actually gone to their Orochi launcher, which is a crankbait rod. So this is a 7'11" rod. It's a 6 power. It's rated for 3/4 to 2 ounce baits. This bait comes in just about at 2 ounces. So it's at the top end of the rating, but the reason I choose this rod is because it's got that parabolic action that helps keep these trebles pinned in that fish's mouth or face. Okay, a lot of times I got clients that don't listen to me or friends that don't listen to me, and they swing on their hard bait bites. All right, and a lot of times they barely hook these fish. So it's important to have the soft taper, crankbait taper. It's really important to have that softer action rod to absorb those head shakes, especially from big, mean, smallmouth and spots, and keep those hooks from ripping out. We work way too hard to get bites, only to have them pull free. Right, so on that I've got a Lexa HD 300. I've got a little bit faster gear ratio on this. This is a 7.4 to 1 gear ratio, and I'm actually going to utilize a lot of handle. in the way that I'm presenting this bait. Okay, I might pull the rod here and there, but for the most part it's like quarter turns, eighth turns, and getting that bait to turn, to glide, you know, smooth, slow rolling it and letting it just kind of S-glide. Orochi XX launcher, Lexa 300 for my I-Slide 185s. Not what you would consider a traditional swim bait rod, but for keeping those bigger fish pinned, I found it does an excellent job. It's 7'11", gets a nice long cast, and it still has a lot of backbone once you're loaded up. And it's still the same thing with largemouth, guys. We're fishing no drag. Okay, hook those fish, control them. The rest of that rod is nice and soft to absorb all those head shakes and jumps if they are able to clear the water. All right, next up in line is the 8-inch soft bait class of baits. Here I've got an 8-inch Magdraft and then a Defiant 210. And both of these baits are about 2 ounces in weight. So this is when we step into a rod like a Mark 48. And this rod is special in that it's a 7'8" rod. It's 3 to 4 inches shorter than some of the other models. I prefer using this rod when I'm making target specific casts. All right, closer quarters, fishing docks, brush, whatever. If I don't need to make super long bomb casts, that little bit of difference in rod length is going to help me make more roll casts. I make a lot of backhand roll casts, forward hand roll casts, skip casts, getting up and under docks with these baits. Both those baits skip really well, as you've seen from previous videos that we posted here. So when I'm fishing tight quarters, I want a little bit shorter rod. This is an 8 power, 7'8", and it's rated for 1.2 to 5 ounces, 20 to 40 pound line. It's got a lot of muscle. You can hook big fish in and around heavy cover. This is a fast taper rod, so all you worm and jig fishermen, all those mechanics of us getting bit, winding down, and then popping them with that Bill Dance hook set, same thing applies with these soft baits. Okay, and this mechanic and rule that I'm talking about applies all the way up to line to all the big baits, like the big Defiant, big 10-inch Magdraft, and the plethora of big soft baits out on the market. What happens is these fish will come up and engage a soft bait, engulf the entire bait. So they're actually going to consume your bait, they're going to close down on it, and you can ask Johnny or Carnell or anybody else that's handled some of the big bass out of my live wells. Like, when those fish are fresh, they've got a ton of jaw strength. You'll go to grab them and they'll shake free of your hold, like grown men getting owned by bass. All right, so those fish will come up, eat your soft bait, close their mouth on it, and what's happening is, if you don't pop them with that hook set, that jaw stays clenched, and you actually never get any forward movement or penetration on your hook point. So that big hook set is actually popping that mouth open and allowing that bait to travel forward and set hooks into their mouth. A lot of the guys talk about wind setting on soft baits, and man, I cringe. Like, yeah, I'm sure there are times when you'll get some penetration. Unless you're getting that fish to open their mouth, you're going to have a really hard time getting forward movement on that bait to penetrate past the barb. So that's why you see big hook set after big hook set for me when I'm fishing a soft bait. And man, the numbers don't lie. My bite to hook up percentage and my hookup to landing ratio is pretty high. I treat every opportunity like it's that one, because it could be. You just never know. All right, so the difference with the hard bait is when these fish come up and try to eat a hard bait, you'll notice a lot of the content, a lot of the photos, you'll notice especially like it's usually towards the front of the bait, but they'll have one hook lodged in the corner of their mouth because they're going to come up and try to eat this thing. They're going to attempt to swallow it and engulf it, but very rarely will they actually get past that front hook. They just get hooked initially before that whole bait can actually slide into their mouth. Okay, that's why that back hook a lot of times is kind of just like free hanging and ends up pinning them on the side of their face, top of their heads, under their throats. I can't remember the time I actually had a hard bait literally swallowed by a largemouth bass. Like, I can't remember a time that's ever happened. I've caught thousands of these things now. So that's the difference in the mechanics. And with hard baits, we're not setting the hook. They hook themselves. You should be fishing sharp hooks. You're pressing them up against this hard body. And you're going to hook them. You're going to hook them better by not swinging on them, especially if you're fishing braid. But that's a whole nother topic. We'll get into that in the future. All right. So the Mark 48, great rod for fishing that 8-inch class soft bait in and around cover. And then the next one up is actually the Warhammer. Okay, so this is a 7'11", 8.5 power. So a little bit longer rod, a little bit more beef. It's rated 3/8 to 2 ounces. The 2 ounce range, it's at the upper end of the rating for this rod, but it's one of my favorite rods for fishing open water, big long casts. If I'm fishing big flats or offshore humps or ledges or breaks, I need to get that bait away from the boat as much as possible and control as much of that line and that fish when I finally get bit. This is one of my favorite rods. This is actually, I believe, designed to be a punching rod. But for an 8-inch, 2 ounce range bait, give or take, this is one of my favorite rods. All right, loads up really nice, especially on big smallies. And once again, I've got a Lexa HD 300, a little bit slower gear ratio, it's 6:3 to 1. I've got a 28-pound fluorocarbon spooled on this one. Next up, we're going to talk about some of the bigger hard baits. All right, something like this Italian 190 or this Megabass 220. Right, 8+ inch baits, big trebles. You guys really want to think back to your traditional hard bait fishing experiences, whether that's a lipless crankbait, whether that's a topwater walking bait, a popper, jerk baits. Okay, the same problems that you have with fish ripping off the hook, especially when they're only hooked on one treble, you're going to experience the same thing, except they're going to be a little bit bigger fish when they're eating stuff like this. So we're going to go to a softer action rod. One of my favorite rods right now is this TS Destoyer Blackjack. Now this is a Japanese domestic market product, but you can find them from Ben at the Hookup Tackle. He's got one of the greatest selections of JDM rods in the country. Okay, and this is a little bit softer rod. It's 7'11", rated to 4 ounces. And some of these baits here that I like to fish, including the I-Slide 262T, are up to 6 ounces in weight. But I'm telling you, this Blackjack fishes that bait beautifully. It fishes all the hard body treble hook baits superbly. Nice soft tip, helps me swim those baits really well. But most importantly, once I get those fish hooked, it's got a little bit more give and a softer taper to keep them hooked. Those are the 3 hardest things to do, right? Get bit, hook them, land them. So the Blackjack is easily my favorite rod right now. And I've caught everything from big rooster fish on the big Trigia pencils down in Costa Rica to big largemouth and muskies on it. It's got a lot of power, but more importantly, it's got that right taper that I like for fishing the hard bait. On this particular Blackjack, I've got a Lexa 300. This is the wind grip model. Once again, 6:3 to 1 gear ratio. I'm fishing a little bit slower and more methodical when I'm targeting trophy largemouth than when I'm fishing other species. Okay, and I will make the statement that This is probably the closest thing to the best all-around rod if you were to only choose one rod. Now, this isn't a cheap rod. I believe it's like $500, $600. It does a lot of things really well. You can actually watch a video where we're actually fishing a Defiant 210, this one actually. When I had a catastrophic failure, the reel popped out of the reel seat because I didn't tighten it down enough the night before when we set up our tackle. Just excited to get through all the gear and get out fishing. I will come out and say that this rod also fishes that 8-inch soft bait really well, especially if you're fishing in and around shallow cover with braided lines. The softer action of this rod helps offset that lack of stretch for those of you guys that like fishing braided lines. And that's something that I continue to be experimenting with more and more this year with my big baits, based off of my experience with fishing all those other multi-species. This is my preferred setup for fishing the big glide baits. I-Slide 262, you're talking 10-inch plus class baits, 6 ounces, same rod, but I do like going to a bigger Lexa 400. It's quite a bit bigger in size overall, but if you look at the spool size difference and the arbor size, it's actually dramatically bigger. So when I'm fishing that big glide, I'm actually fishing a 41-pound fluorocarbon a lot of times. And obviously that's a much heavier diameter line, and having that bigger reel really keeps the memory down, makes casting a lot easier. That line flows off of that spool nicely on long bomb casts. It's got a nice rate of pickup on the retrieve. It might not seem like much, but I'm going to take every little advantage I can get. All right, so I-Slide 262T, similar big glide baits, Lexa 400 on that TS Destoyer Blackjack. Those of you guys that like fishing the heavy braided fluoro connection will see I do have a rod dedicated solely for that. I've got a Lexa 300 here. I've got, I think it's 79-pound rated 8-weave braid, 41-pound shock leader on a Levante Leviathan. Now, I don't know when the next batch of Levantes is coming in, but I am fishing the previous generation and loving this rod. And you've probably seen Johnny on the Clear Lake series catching some fish on this on the A-rig, but this is also a great setup for an I-Slide 185. We're fishing the big Mega Dog, and even the I-Slide 262T. Now it's a softer rod than the TS Destoyer Blackjack. Okay, so mind you, it's going to bend further down into the blank. This has got a little bit more beef. This is an incredible rod once you've got them hooked. Much lower price point. The Levante series retails for $200, so it's a much more affordable option, especially for the guys that are at the entry level of this game. All right, so something to consider. And you're going to continue to see me experiment more and more with the heavier braid to leader combinations. So we'll have another tackle breakdown on line applications for swim baits in the future. All right, so two of my favorite big soft baits these days are a Defiant 247 and a 10-inch Magdraft. Both baits are about that 10-inch range and 6 ounces in weight, give or take. Okay, so you need to step your game up on your rod selection. Now, one of my favorite rods as of late is this older series Destoyer Black Jungle Onager. Okay, now this is about the heaviest rod that I use when targeting big largemouth. This is an F11. This is a heavy rod, 7'10". It's an inch shorter than something like the It's an inch shorter than the Onager in the USA Destoyer series, and this is rated for 3 to 18 ounce lures. Okay, 16 to 40-pound line. So it's definitely up there on the big bait application scale. When I'm fishing these big soft baits down on a deep rock pile or snaggy cover, anytime I need to muscle a big fish and stay really efficient and control that thing in and around big cover, I'm going to step up to this setup. And this is a Lexa 400 HD, 6.3 gear ratio. It's got a lot of power. Once I get that big power handle turning, I've got a lot of leverage. And you guys have seen me bounce 11-pound class fish on this particular rod. I've caught a 53-inch muskies. Man, it's a beef stick. I've wrestled sharks with this rod and groupers, so I have no doubt in my mind that it'll handle the biggest largemouth I could ever hook. Incredible rod. It's a lotto rod. This is going to handle most of those bigger baits that I'm throwing these days. I don't really throw the super big 12, 13, 14, 15-inch baits anymore. I found that the return on my investment in time and effort hasn't really proven worth it, to be honest. But hey, maybe someone can prove otherwise. It's getting hot out here. I appreciate you guys tuning into the Big Bass Streams channel here. Make sure you guys also subscribe to my personal channel. I've got a lot more green room breakdown sessions coming for you guys there. Big shout out to my guys on my Patreon. More patron specific content coming your way. And when you guys subscribe to this channel and my channel, make sure you turn your notifications on. Leave a comment below. You guys think I'm missing anything? Do I need more swim bait setup? Let us know. As always, stay positive, stay safe out there these days, and continue to aim high, dream big. Oliver and I signing out. Peace.
LRPs. Some of the best yet. Some of the best yet. They bite like that, like that, like that. Big bass, double digits.
Kick up the fire right on top.
Low fall, blast off, time to get some cast off. Doing this here for years, get my pass on. Stream mask on, putting in work. Snap back, got me focused, never settle on a shirt. I missed one and hit one, man, that's getting some. 2, 3, 4, 5 more, come on, that's ripping up. The way the basement's sticking, the way my